All right, we're live. Welcome, everyone. We have Heather here. Hello, Heather. Good morning.
Hey, Andrew. So excited to be here.
Heather, I know where you are, but why don't you share? Where are you in the world today?
Well, I'm in San Francisco in the Bay Area, probably like a 30-minute drive from you, like literally where you're sitting right now,
This is
right?
true. It's true. And I think the first time we met in person, probably 2.5 years ago
Yeah.
or something like that. And due to COVID, we haven't been able to have any in-person meetings, but I am looking forward to seeing you in person soon.
I know. We should make that happen, actually. Yeah.
Soon enough. Soon enough. If you're joining us from afar, please add where you're from. We've got a little bit more of what Heather's going to drive us through today is a little bit more of an advanced material course. Hey, Terry,
Oh,
welcome.
hey, Terry.
Terry, I think you're going to learn some fun things today. And welcome from Toronto. So we kind of we invited a smaller group of people to today's session because we're going to tap into some things that we thought people who had maybe a little bit of experience with revenue management would really it'd be newish to them or kind of exciting to them. So excited for what Heather has to share, but we're going to give people another minute or two, and then we're going to dive in. Heather, tell us a little bit more about you while we're rating. What should people know?
Yeah. I can talk about my background a little bit. So I've really been involved with revenue management and distribution my whole career. Having done revenue management for hotels, resorts, restaurants. It's fun. Restaurant revenue management is a thing. Those of you that don't know. And then, the last 4 or 5 years now, like fully focused on vacation rental, short-term rental. So I think it's an exciting time for our space because revenue management is a fairly new discipline, but we now have technology, obviously Wheelhouse being one of the leaders in, providing the tools necessary to up level your revenue management strategies. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, this is a whole new world of revenue management in our space. And for all of us on the line, we're here. So we're obviously leading the pack, right? And moving it forward.
I'm going to be interested to ask you at some point during this what we can learn, what short-term rentals can learn from restaurant revenue management.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think you and I both agree that the hotels can influence and continue to probably be, at least in the way they run their revenue organizations, potentially a little bit ahead. My argument is going to be that technology in the short-term rental space will surpass hotels soon. But
yeah. No, I love this question because one of the difference, so there's a component of restaurant revenue management that's different than hotels or short-term rental in that it's time, because it's RevPAS, revenue per available seat hour, because you can turn a seat versus like you have one night. So like in a restaurant, you turn a seat and you have the component of time. But in short-term rental, what's the same as restaurant is the component of changing supply. The idea, like I can make a 2-top or a 4-top to seat people, or I can add seats at the bar, right? And like what we know in our industry is supply is always changing. Our own portfolios are always changing. And that could be homes coming in and out, coming kind of out of the sales path because the owner is using it, right? It's just ever-changing supply. So that's a little bit more in line, I would say, with seats in a restaurant.
Love that.
So,
I love that. I'm going to have to chew on that. I know a few folks who are working on dynamic pricing for restaurants, so we'll have to talk about that more. But for the main agenda, it's 9:05. We're going to start, everyone. So, Heather, do you want to share your screen? Then I'll give you a quick intro.
Yeah.
Some of the folks on this call probably know you, but for those who don't, you're in for a treat. Great. So welcome, everyone, to a presentation on competitive set mastery that, as you'll see, will flow into some other pretty interesting and powerful amplifications of your revenue management strategy. I've got the privilege of kind of working on the deck a little bit with Heather and seeing what she's put together. I'm really excited about what she's going to share today. And Heather will share more about her background. I was alluding to this in the intro, but I've known Heather for more than 2 years. We started talking about kind of not only how to think about revenue management, but how to think about every part of your commercial organization. And that's distribution, it's marketing, it's other components that we'll discuss today and hopefully in future webinars together as well. But I found Heather to be a straight shooting, hyper collaborative, amazing person to work with and to trade ideas with. As you'll see today, she'll share kind of what her team does. As we're stepping through the materials, we'll see what her team does to amplify organizations everywhere. But can't say enough great things about Heather. Super excited to share the screen, and I'm going to hand it over to you because there's a fire truck going by. But Heather, without further ado, take it away.
No, Andrew, you've been an awesome partner. And yeah, to echo that, it's been a fun journey getting to know you more over the last few years. And here we are. It's been great to collaborate on this. So I find this topic very interesting, very relevant, and probably one of the most critical things about how to run a successful business and portfolio. So a little bit about Richer Logic. So we support revenue management, distribution, and overall commercial strategy, which means it starts with the data, and then the data informs really your overall marketing organization. And so we'll dive into that at the end. But together with myself and our leadership team at Richer Logic, we have over 25 years of experience as well as graduate level degrees in revenue management. And then, like I noted, our experience spans across many different travel verticals or hospitality verticals. And, just on the right here quickly, our purpose is to provide expert agile, it's a fast moving space, cutting edge revenue management distribution, both reporting and support, business process support. And then, we see ourselves as an extension of your team, helping you optimize your tech and your business process. And then, our superpower, we like to say, is our ability to bring it all together. So Richer Logic, it makes a lot of sense. And we like to have a little fun. Okay. So what do we do? Like when we start interacting with our partners, obviously it's important for us to understand your business, your goals. We call this growth mapping. Then really diving into discovering your system. So, those of you on the line likely use Wheelhouse, are considering using Wheelhouse, figuring Wheelhouse is a critical part of getting it right? And really optimizing the tech and then having the business process on top of that. So how are you using your data and how are you looking at market data? And then, the strategies, right? Like if you have accurate data, you're going to have accurate strategies. Do you know what levers are in your toolbox that you can pull? And then ultimately, we work in two ways. One is a short engagement of 3 months or a long engagement where we stay with you through this comprehensive roadmap and continually just be a partner to advance your team's skills and strategies. Okay, so that's enough about me. Let's dive into the education part. And this is, again, it was super fun to put together with Andrew. So what you'll learn today are 3 things. Comp set benchmarking and kind of the 101 of how you develop views of your performance versus a comp set or the market. We're going to explain what RevPAR index is, revenue per available rental, and then index. And it's a really important metric, and this is what we do as Richer Logic, is bring it all together to help you see these views and this reporting expertise. And we're building revenue management, right? So the third thing is how to move from revenue function to commercial organization. So that's the very end. We'll kind of talk about once you get 1 and 2 down, what would be next on things on that roadmap. Okay, benchmarking 101, your foundation for success. And I have to give big thanks to Amelia at Wheelhouse who helped design this deck. It's super slick. So excited to have her help on that. So defining your comp set. If you're not looking at the right competitors, you're not driving the right decisions. And we find this when we work with partners, right? Because especially in major markets, but even in smaller markets, you have pockets of neighborhoods that are different. You have different types of inventory that behaves very differently. So if you're not benchmarking or looking at the right views, you might not be making the right decisions to optimize revenue. So some examples of this, right? Like inventory type matters. If I look at all 3 bedrooms in a market, it might be a miss because a 3-bedroom house might be very different than a 3-bedroom condo. And so obviously Wheelhouse offers the ability to unlock this kind of view and detail. And so understanding the questions to ask could help you, right, go into Wheelhouse and get what you need. Another tips and trick here is when you think about, well, does it matter or not? How do people search? I think it matters maybe that their homes on one side of a river or the other side of a river. And talking to your Vrbo or Airbnb market manager, if you have access to the channel partner, it can help you get those kind of insights. Like when people search, are they likely to search this and this together or not? Is it the same consideration set? And then you can get a sense of like backing up. I think it matters. Does it matter? And getting that kind of top of funnel data from them can be really helpful if they're willing to share.
So I love that, Heather. So and when we were building this, you were talking about that. So you're saying I can go to my market manager and I could reach out to someone at Vrbo or Airbnb and they'll give me information about search patterns. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Does Booking.com do that? Are there other teams that do that too? I like that as a kind of a fun hack.
Yeah, so this kind of leads to a little bit of a top of funnel discussion, right? And whether or not they'll share with you exact detail, depends maybe on who you're dealing with. But directionally, I know Vrbo's typically very helpful, right? Like they can at least share some insight that like, yes, that does matter and just validate. But staying with top of funnel, some other things to think about there, are, do you want to look at airline data? If you're an island destination, there are ways you can get access to airline data. I know Key Data is a great partner to Wheelhouse. Some of you may know Key Data acquired a company called Demand IQ. Demand IQ helps you look at that shopping insights on your own website. So that goes beyond Google Analytics, and you can see how many people shop this arrival and departure, or how many people shop for this filter on this amenity. And like you might find like that hot tub, every single time someone is searching for that hot tub on a 4-bedroom. And that will just, again, give you insights to like what matters, right? That top of funnel data. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, Andrew, but maybe just a little more detail on that.
All the tips that you found are going to be helpful and fun, but it's funny, I work in the revenue management space and I hadn't thought about calling the Vrbo market manager and saying, hey, what are you seeing on top of the demand funnel? Some of these channels have historically shared some data with you. Sometimes that's only something they provide to larger customers. But I think also a way maybe to sneak into, if you do want to reach out to your Vrbo market manager, maybe a way to approach it is saying, hey, I'm thinking about expanding my portfolio in this market. What data can you provide to help me? And I'd love to work with Vrbo on that. So some hacks to maybe get some good top of the funnel data would be great. Or hopefully helpful. And then I do think, we love the Key Data team, and the Predict IQ is a really nice add to their tool set of helping people figure out where bookings are occurring. So nice add there.
Yeah, just on those lines of top of funnel. So I guess I'll just kind of close this slide with this key point, right? Putting in the work to get it right really matters. And once you have that in place, you're looking at the right views to inform the right strategy. All right. So custom comp sets, you can look at the market and then how customized do you go? So obviously you want to understand your relative market positioning. Do you have super luxury homes? So then you would say, well, obviously you're going to always edge higher end. Do you have a mixed portfolio, right? Kind of getting a sense of your market positioning of like your brand. Gaining granular diagnostics to solve specific problems. So you know where you stand. Now, by having these custom views, you can get really specific, right? And then this is where the incremental revenue is going to come from. And then an example we gave here, right? Once you have views into that data, maybe you'll find little takeaways that you didn't realize were even there. So maybe you find that somebody in your competition is getting midweek occupancy that you're not getting. So once you diagnose this is a problem and this might be where you're losing, Then this is where you kick into kind of that commercial level. How do you go about figuring out how to solve that? There's clearly midweek demand. How do you get some of that? Maybe we'll talk about some more examples later on. So best practices. As you're selecting these custom comp sets, we talked about, obviously home versus condo, number of beds, and then you can continue to go more granularly, right, into like amenities, more specific location. But ultimately, this first bullet point here, you want to make sure it's statistically significant, right? And that broader is typically better. If you go as few as just selecting 10 other homes versus selecting 20 or 50, and you might find in a market this is hard to do. If you have some large homes, there may not be that many of them. And it might be that you want to create a view of, say, 15 to 20 other large homes in the market. The other thing here in bullet point number 3 is staying with that like unique accommodation. You might find you're competing with multiple markets. A great example of this multiple market is island destinations or the Caribbean. When people are shopping the Caribbean, they're not necessarily decided yet on what island. They might be looking for beachfront 7-bedroom. And in that sense, you might say, I actually want to kind of create a view of this bedroom type across a few different islands. And that is who you're competing with, because that's how the consideration and shopping and buying process works for the customer.
I love this tip, Heather. I just want to double click on this because there was a big announcement from Airbnb yesterday where there's kind of a new type of search they're introducing. And that type of search is you say, I want to go to exactly what Heather just described, a beachfront location. And they'll show you beachfront locations across countries, across a globe, literally. So there is an emergent pattern here of people searching. They're actually less tied to going to a particular destination. They're more tied to a particular inventory type. And the assumption is it's easy enough to get anywhere in the world now that they can kind of show this inventory type in a collective search. So this was something that Heather pointed out, that you might want to look across multiple markets. The more unique your accommodation is, the more likely you're going to fall into that type of search where people are saying, I want a tree house or a yurt or a beachfront or a mountain front destination. Like really interesting new search pattern evolving. That's going to change how people have to think about their comp set. I thought that was a really fun ad, Heather, that you put here that Airbnb amplified just yesterday. So
yeah, it really and you're right. And how the customer shopping experience will be enabled will lend to like different ways we think about our competition. So yeah. And I guess on that note, the supply being fluid is another aspect of that, whether you're looking at just in your market or you've expanded and you see more supply popping up in competitor markets. An important part of custom comp sets is that you're monitoring them on a somewhat regular basis. And there isn't an exact answer to this. It could be once a quarter, it could be, twice a year, or it could be something that you just do once a year to say, how much has supply changed? I'm comparing myself to every 3-bed condo in this radius, and then I've selected them all that I want. But maybe then again, at a 6-month mark or 1-year mark, you look again, did it go from 50 to 70? Did 20 new 3 beds come into the rental pool, right, in your market? And just being aware of how that supply is fluctuating. So this last bullet point, comp sets versus market reports. A common thing we saw through COVID in many markets was the condo versus home. And so if you had just condos, you might have found that you weren't seeing the same like accelerated growth as a home. So if you created a view of condo comp sets, and that's all you looked at, and you didn't look at the market, you might not realize that there is more demand coming in. It's just that the condos were at a disadvantage. And that, the theory is right, that tied to like social distancing scoring of homes were more attractive than condos. But the message here is just don't lose track of the whole story. Maybe your market isn't down, just that specific unit type might be down. And then, you can navigate that, right? What are strategies you can put in place? So.
Saying, yes, build a comp set, compare yourself to the comp set. but also make sure that you're comparing yourself to the market as well. Is that how you
Yeah,
think about
like
it?
I can say, because like maybe those condos is like, you know what, my 2-bed condos are flat year over year in the month of May, right? But if the market maybe is up 10% or 15%, and then you know that, right? So it gives you the relativity to, all right, then maybe it's also informs like, well, you maybe want to go after different homes to grow your portfolio in the market. That's a
I
more
love that.
attractive type of inventory, right? But
Yep.
you understand the whole story. It's just making sure the whole narrative is there.
Yep. Love it.
And again, like obviously with Wheelhouse, we have the screenshot here, and I think we're going to jump over to talk about this, like how you would go about it. You won't lose sight of the market. The market is there, but then the ability to still see these comp set specific views. So some ideas, just diving a little deeper, hyper local, right? Like neighborhoods can matter. Like in a big market like Orlando, we experienced this with a partner. Like it's not all the same, and we recognize this market needed a different perspective, and that you wouldn't have thought, right? But within a mile or 2 miles sometimes really matters in some of the major markets. Aspirational competitors is another best practice. So you think, well, my units are kind of middle of the road. So if you pick all like middle of the road units, you might be missing out on what the potential is. So to be able to have something aspirational in there that's like, well, the nicer units are X, because this helps you play the occupancy rate game. You could say, well, can I achieve the same total revenue on my unit that isn't super brand new as the brand new unit can? And the answer is yes. You just might have to play a different game. It might have to be you win because you can achieve a higher OC with a lower rate. But ultimately, maybe you can generate the same amount of revenue on that unit as the nicer unit. So that's the theory around the philosophy around aspirational views. Seasonal, summer, winter, if you're ski in, ski out condos, what matters? So this could be a potential for you if you have extreme seasonality. Weekend versus weekday. This might be a little more of a major market like a Nashville, where especially as corporate travel is coming back, you could see an opportunity to, just completely different customer base opportunities that you want to look at. And then the out of market listings, like we talked about with the Caribbean example, is really think about your unique homes, especially. Are they competing with other destinations because it's someone searching for that type of experience in home or accommodation?
And
is there anything to add? Yeah, jump in.
I guess you had mentioned, so let's say I identify a problem. So I know my portfolio has a particular weakness, such as, let's keep with the example of weekdays. And yet when I go and build a comp set, I start to identify that there are competitors doing a great job of selling their weekdays near me. How can I action on that? What are some of the, let's unlock that a little bit. What might I do? Should I find out that, okay, it's not my whole market. Well, maybe my market occupancy is lower on weekdays. It's quite common. But if there are winners, like how can I go learn from those people? What should I be doing to drive that particular performance metric?
Yeah, I mean, you could get into like guerrilla tactics, right? Like, who do you know that could talk to so-and-so that can like really try to figure out what that company's doing? Mm-hmm. Do you try to bump into the actual guests at some point? That's like real guerrilla tactics. But ultimately, what we can start to look through the data a little bit more too, right? Like if you can get your hands on some of that top of funnel data, you might get a sense of who are these, where are they coming from? What are the lengths of stay? Is it that they're getting like 3 and 4 week stays and we're not getting any of that? Is it that they have, is there other types of partnerships they have with travel agencies, insurance claims adjusters, other venues, like maybe corporate retreat venues? Like, how do you get to like, what do they have that's giving them midweek business? And you could try to find more in the data, as well as like the guerrilla tactics, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because we we recently launched comp sets. And one of the first learnings we've had in a couple of weeks is that people actually really want to be able to split out weekend and weekday occupancy more easily, right? And right now you could export your data and you could run your own analysis, but let's be honest, it could be simpler than that. So I think there's for folks who are listening and joining us, whatever cut of data that you want, because what Heather's pointed out is like, go find the weaknesses in your portfolio. Find nearby properties that might actually have a strength in that. Try to learn from them. But any cuts of data that would be helpful to you all, we'd love to hear about, because it's, this is a way, what Heather's teaching you is a way to find and analyze and address the weaknesses. And we want to be able to help too. So I think I was really curious about how to address the problem that I think a lot of folks have, which is, how do you sell your weekdays more effectively? Mm-hmm. And you did point out a couple ways to do it, but for those who are listening to us again, like, think about, your portfolio will have a weakness. And as we'll see as we step into RevPAR indexing, even if you're performing really strong, there are ways you can continue to improve. I just think this is one of the scalpels you can use to dissect your portfolio in really interesting ways to find a path to the solution. So I like these, and the out of market listing one again, I think is so interesting, because almost like you were highlighting this aspirational comp set, you might want to go find the high performers in you. Out of market listings, you might, again, if you have a unique property, you might want to go learn from a unique property in another market and see how they're marketing and see what they're doing, because again, they're attracting demand that wasn't expecting to be there necessarily. It's kind of wild.
Yeah. And it really ties to, like you said, how Airbnb, and will be interesting to watch the other channels, how they're guiding like the customer search and buying process. So
yeah, I think, Heather, so I'm curious a little bit about so theoretically, Google obviously has a search information for where people, usually when you're searching like island destinations, you go to Google, and then people have historically honed in their searches afterward on like, oh, I found this great place, Barbados, I'm going to go now look on Airbnb or Vrbo, etc. So theoretically, I have to see that, or I have to believe that other search engines or OTAs are going to kind of adjust to this philosophy as well. Like, I kind of think this is the start of something pretty, a meaningful trend shift in how demand emerges in markets. But maybe I'm getting too excited about it.
No. I think it's right. And the COVID rebound, and what does it mean for all of travel? So what are the airlines going to do, right? Like, we know that they offer you, like, are your dates flexible too, if you travel one day earlier or one day later? How, if you're flying versus driving, how much is it tying to like airfare fluctuations? And, understanding, like, when people are just making a decision about their trip, are they like, oh, okay, I can go to Maui or I can go to Kauai, but the flight is so much cheaper to Maui than Kauai, so I'm just going to choose Maui, right? Like, how does that all play out, right? But ultimately, it's like, oh, is it worth it to pay a little more to Kauai because I want this accommodation?
Right.
So all those factors, but it's easier. It's like the technology has made it easier for customers, like, to have that flexibility and like be able to compare their travel decisions in ways like that we've never had before.
It's a whole new game.
Yeah, whole new game. Good way to say it. Okay. All right. So we're going to shift gears into section 2 and talk about RevPAR index. And Andrew, I'll let you take this slide.
Okay. So I think what you're about to learn is arguably the most important metric, the most valuable thing you can know about your business. And this is eventually, I would argue, a metric you should know offhand. And I have to give credit to Heather and her team. They're probably the best in the game at this. Heather's going to walk through a real example here of how RevPAR index is leveraged to understand your performance and to find your strengths, find your weaknesses, etc. I do think this bleeds into a little bit of, it's going to look initially like quite a bit of numbers thrown at you, but within a minute, it's going to make sense, I promise you. And then it's going to be the thing that I would encourage people to continue to drill down on, your RevPAR index. And the other thing that Heather really did a nice job of, she just set us up for this because, build out these comp sets. we're going to be able to leverage that for a RevPAR index score here. But please lean in. Heather's the best in the game at this. She's going to share a really important metric. And Heather, I did add this slide because I do think it's a little advanced, but Heather, take it.
Yeah, want me to go? Are we ready? Okay, you're so funny. Yeah, warning. No, we're going to break it down. It's actually really simple math. So this is what we do to help our partners. We help you develop this reporting with these layers. And the Key Data Wheelhouse partnership is a great example of this, because you might find that it's important for you to create your views using data, say, from those two sources, from Key Data as well as from Wheelhouse, right? Or other sources, and how you think about your views, what is impactful to you, we help you get there. So here are the components. So, and the definition. An index is a relative score or a ratio between two metrics. In short-term rental, we use an index to measure your performance versus your comp set or market. When set up properly, it should illustrate your performance versus your fair share.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. And on the next slide, we get into it, right? So if a really easy way to say it is if there are 100 homes in the market and there are $100 of incoming revenue, you might say, well, each home gets $1, right? Should get $1 of that revenue. But if your home got $10 of that revenue, then that home just did 10x, what it technically should have. That was really simplified. We're going to get into it more, but it's the concept of all the demand that you had access to, did you get at least what you should have gotten, or did you get more than it or less than that? And there's a way we build that view for you so that you're really clear on what I considered or what I believed was my demand opportunity and what did I capture. And ultimately, index is, did you go up faster or slower than your comp set, your market, up or down? And it helps you quickly see that. So the calculation is really easy, right? It's just you versus market, OC, ADR, RevPAR, and then it's 1 is the metric of fair share. If you got it, you got exactly as much as you should have. If you did less, or if you did more than 1, you got more than you should have, and less than 1, you got less than you should have. So this is where the rubber hits the road. So I know this is a lot of numbers on the slide. This is an example. Yeah. Do you want to jump in, Andrew? Okay, go ahead.
So you're telling me, Heather, this is if this number is going up, my strategy is working. If it's not working, right? And
yes.
Yep. And then anything above 1. So is anything above here is just illustrating, even if I'm above 1, if my number is not going up, is it still fair to say my strategy is not working?
Yeah, that gets into percent change and percent share change, which we'll show you. Mm-hmm. And then in the other example, we'll talk about when you really overperform, it's hard to hold on that lead. So the reality is your comp set may close the gap, right? Doesn't mean you're still not winning. You just might not be winning by as much. Mm-hmm. So, and we'll talk about how occupancy, obviously you have ceilings. But how does it work? So in this example, this is last year. You did 60% OC, the market did 40. Obviously you did better. Your index was 1.5. Again, that's you divided by market, right? That was our calculation now. ADR, not as high as the market. So you did 0.8. You didn't quite get your fair share in rate, but ultimately this was a winning strategy for you. You did better than your fair share at $60 RevPAR versus the market at 50, or comp set, right? Whatever your view is, but we believe this is good benchmarking. We've done the work to create the views that are right, that are best fit. So what happens in the next year? So that's what we did last year. This year, as comparison, so call this, just full year. You grew your OC. You went from 60 to 65. The market also grew OC. They went from 40 to 50, which meant your gap, right, in OC exceeding market got lessened. So your index went down to 1.3. ADR grew for us, ADR grew for the market, but the market grew faster than us in rate, so we dropped our index to 0.77. We still actually ended with our fair share, same RevPAR as the market, great. But ultimately, did we do well? No. We, lost stock a little faster. Or didn't grow as fast in OC. We didn't grow as fast in rate, and ultimately our overall index did drop. So we didn't keep our same lead on the market. Now the why and the what, right? That's all the underlayers of like, what do you do about it? But if you didn't see this, you might think you did well. You grew year over year. And if all you're comparing to is your own year over year growth, or you had a number you were trying to target, like all I want to do is grow X percent, you achieved it, you might just think you did well and you're happy with that. If you didn't have these views of like what was possible. So this is an example of a partner where what you're seeing here is reporting views that Richer Logic helps produce. So this is our, this is a view of, Q1 COVID, our partner, made some conscious decisions to be a first mover in lowering rate. The risk in lowering rate, right, is always, am I going to lower rate and will it drive enough occupancy to make up for any rate shortfalls? So how do we measure that? In this case, you can see they actually have a rate below 1. You can see this red here, kind of in this first quarter. This is versus same time last year. They actually did have a bit of a decline, even in previous year. They really went hard on some lower rates early as a first mover. But ultimately, these occupancies are super crazy high, right? They had a lot of room in OC, and they really milked it. And so you can see their OC indexes were through the roof, which led to RevPAR indexes of 3x. Crazy. Now, the washout is, in Q1 of next year, can they hold a 3x the market in RevPAR? This will be tough to hold on to. Like, they killed it because it was a weird, COVID made a great decision, and drove OC. Now you could say, well, could they have drove that same OC without these rate shortfalls? Maybe, but in the end, that's the art and science of revenue management. In the end, they were happy with 3x index. That wasn't typically what they did. And, they're at a ceiling here, right? So they have to grow rate faster than the market because they have very little room to grow OC next year. So this is where that percent change is also just part of the story.
Heather, I'm curious if you go back for 1 second.
Sure.
So to that question, I think one of the challenges of revenue management is trying to discern whether you did set the correct strategy, right? Let's say your performance improved. Could you have done better? That's the existential question of revenue managers everywhere, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Can I evaluate other people's RevPAR index and see if there was a better strategy in that? So if someone had even a higher RevPAR index than me, could I look at their strategy, or does the RevPAR index help me pull apart other strategies that I was not able to pursue to understand that question of did I set the right strategy? Because I'm just chewing on that a little bit. It seems like it might be possible.
This isn't a great, but let's take this week of March 20th. Mm-hmm. I wasn't able to. So with the similar rate strategy, of being below market and rate, I didn't achieve quite the same OC levels. Mm-hmm. So you could say, well, should I have done something different here? Was there opportunity to do 3x the market? So you could dive deeper on that week to do a little more diagnostic. Was it that had you gone a little lower, was 0.5 or 0.6 really more the magic spot? Mm-hmm. And if I was at that low of an ADR index to the market, could I have driven another 10, 15 points in OC? That's what we're talking about here, right? And this is the rate sensitivity, price elasticity conversation. Mm-hmm. But seasonally, that can change. Unit by unit, that can change, right? We're not giving you here, what are you looking at? Certain bed type? Are you looking at a whole portfolio? But if you can, when you are using richer logic reporting like this, it's like a book, right? We're helping you with your whole narrative to get to like these answers. And I don't know that you would ever, I mean, you'd have to know the comp set's actual end data, I think, Andrew, to like really do what you're saying. But you can get pretty darn close by going to those levels deeper.
Cool.
And comparing weeks and like looking at length of stay and, you know, doing a little more diagnostic. Did that help?
Yeah. It did. I'm curious. I think you're right that the right data set's required. I think there's some combination of key data and Wheelhouse that probably helps get you there. Of course, this is a new terrain for us to move into, both our partnership with key data as well as comp sets. So I'm curious if we can help unpack the RevPAR index for folks to say, here was the best strategy that would have optimized your springtime cut rate at this point, et cetera. We are obviously trying to do that all the time, but putting these tools in people's hands is really interesting. So kind of something I'm just chewing on. But
yeah. And I mean, there's so much more, right, to like knowing the booking windows and like what did being a first mover mean, right? And you have to know that for your market, and you continue to learn, right, week over week. And you know, so like we've said, historical doesn't necessarily inform future, but how can you like look at what's happening in the future, other data points to like make these decisions? Because it's not black and white. You know, being 0.5 index and rate can drive maybe enough occupancy in a certain season. In another season, you might just like be leaving total money on the table, right? Like you have to figure out, or for a unit type, for your 2 beds versus your 5 beds, there's a different way you win in RevPAR, different formula. So yeah, I know that was a lot, but ultimately when you measure this way and when we help you create these views using the data sources that make sense for you. And again, the beauty of Wheelhouse is it enables you to unlock what you need to curate it and craft it specifically for you. And that this can be the most important metric for a few things, right? Like if you outperform your market or your comp set, you're obviously earning more money. You can use this to attract more and better inventory and grow your business, and ultimately also to raise capital, right? That this is not just, this is proof that you are running a business that outperforms and you're running it better than everybody else.
Yeah. I think I look at a decent amount of fundraising material. The teams that speak to, hey, we doubled revenue, that actually doesn't mean much. Hospitality, accommodations, like we work in a business where relative performance is everything. It's what dominates hotel metrics, right? How did you perform against market? That's the entire point of Smith Travel Research. And in our space too, Heather's team is really kind of pushing that professionalism and the awareness of these metrics. But RevPAR index will ultimately be probably the strongest indicator to investors, to even banks at some point. Like, how can we finance expansion of your business? This is what they'll look to. They'll say, you're clearly a better operator because of RevPAR index. So yeah, it is a language that those who want to expand their portfolio are going to want to be well-versed in speaking.
I love that. And yeah, it's proving like you're a better operator and a better marketer.
Great point.
Yeah, your whole organization. Okay, should we move to section 3? I know that was a lot.
Let's do it. And if people have questions about RevPAR index, A, you can put questions in the chat bot now. B, again, Heather's team has really done the definitive work here. You can see that was a true example of a real customer who truly did outperform their market by 3x. That was thanks to Heather's team. So clearly they're pretty good at figuring out how to get this number, RevPAR index or metric, to a great point. So Heather, I know you're going to share your information later, but if people do want to dive into that with Heather, know that that will be available.
Yeah, thanks for that. So we now go into section 3, assuming we've got all that down. We've got this like baseline figured out. We have really good data that's going to inform our strategy now. So what comes next? And what we ask a lot of our partners is like, do you know all the levers in your toolbox? Do you know everything in your toolbox, right? And this is just an example of what a toolbox might look like, your data and system map. So how many channels do you have? how do you have promotional opportunities on those channels? What is your direct book strategy, your marketing team? Do they know what your needs are, right? Your email marketing, your social strategy. What's not necessarily even part of this technology map might be, do you have other, sales partnerships with like travel agencies, right? Other like wedding venues, where are all these levers and tools in your toolbox? So knowing that, right, what is your approach to commercial strategy? And we always use this term, integrated commercial approach, because really the role of revenue management is to help tell the story, but also to help inform and be a part of like that brainstorming and marketing plan development. So, we talk about revenue management as forecasting, analytics, the distribution part, right? Understanding channels, getting your content right, because just having your price right obviously isn't enough. If everything else is wrong, you're still not going to grow or fully be optimizing. So we talk about distribution. That's a little bit more of a project management skill set, right? Like knowing what's happening with each channel, executing on content updates, understanding how to run promotions. Is that where they're in touch with all the the world of channel and content? And then your digital marketing lever is really that third one, right? And if they're part of the conversation, then you're ensuring that your all of those other strategies, right, driving direct bookings ultimately is tied into what the data is telling you. So, just this note at the bottom, and I actually still sit on the HSMAI Revenue Management Advisory Board. That's a more hotel-leaning organization. It's been around for 100 years, actually, that association.
What does HSMAI stand for?
Oh, Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International.
Aha.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. But it's where I kind of keep my ear to the ground on like what's happening in hotels too, and just to see the kind of differences and just all of lodging and where things overlap. But revenue management in the hotel industry has elevated to almost one of the most important positions in an organization because of how much it drives getting all of this right. So I think it's just, again, an exciting time in our space and vacation rental because we're figuring out how the discipline fits in. And, we're seeing that it has the potential and should really follow the same path, right? How getting this right informs getting just your whole strategy, top line strategy right.
Yeah. And Heather, can you go back to the map for 1 second?
Yeah.
So is your advice here to map this out? Are there tools that people should use for this? Is it just as simple as building in a slide deck? How do you think about developing a system map? And are these all the critical components? These are kind of the foundational components. Tell us a little bit more about this systems map.
Yeah. So, if you understand how you get to channels, right? Like, how can you update all your content in your PMS and it seamlessly goes. Obviously if you are using Wheelhouse, that's your source of truth on all your pricing, length of stay restrictions, everything is managed there and it should be seamlessly integrated to all your channels. But the levers also come into play with like, have you unlocked different promotions on Airbnb? We know there's all different kinds of things that Airbnb tests, Vrbo as well with like boosting capability, what are things? The other thing that's interesting is like some things aren't even in the API. So your PMS provider, right, might say, update your content here, but Airbnb and Vrbo might have like other content areas that aren't even in the API. And so you want to log in and make sure you're like updating them in the channel. Booking.com is interesting because if there's a channel manager switch in between, sometimes you have levers like in the switch or the channel manager, like Booking Pal, might give you some levers that inform Booking.com. Yeah. And then, kind of other niche channels, right? Like there could be opportunity to improve content. Maybe some of them are more international driven and, staying in touch with those channels, right? And knowing what's new and what opportunities they're offering is great best practice.
And does that mean maybe that I'd have, at first I should have a high level systems map such as this? And then maybe you were just speaking to on each individual channel.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. it's good to know, right? Like if someone on your team would know like exactly how they all work, because it's like kind of taking an assessment of like all the tools in your toolbox, right?
Yeah,
like so you know how they all work.
Right. And I think you were sharing something just for folks who maybe haven't put together a systems map yet. Heather, how common is it for you to meet someone who has an accurate systems map in place?
Pretty much everybody we've worked with doesn't know the answer to some question.
Okay.
You know, and so we help figure it out, but there's always kind of like, I'm not sure, like, let's check.
Yeah. I think in terms of tools for teams, what Heather's illustrated here is actually a really good, I think this is a first level articulation of it. I do think diving into each channel specifically is really valuable too. And what kind of content or marketing or promotion opportunities are available on those channels is really, really valuable. But I do think I would agree that if you don't have a data and systems map yet, don't feel bad. Heather can help. As you can see, this is, again, the highest level components of what your system map would look like. But thinking about communicating to ownership groups, to teammates and others who might really want to understand how you're thinking about how you're getting your prices places, how you're thinking about getting your content places, this is a really helpful tool to have. So something worthwhile building out if you don't have it yet today.
The other thing we always like Wheelhouse will help ensure that you have rational pricing, right? That your pricing is nimble and it starts there, right? But lowering rate alone is not a form of promotion. So everything I talked about with channels, it's that shift of like, okay, I can discount rates. And what does that mean if I'm running like promotions? And those are different things because promotions come with additional merchandising, right? And other perks and benefits. So I always like to call that out. Okay. So this is really kind of closing it out. You know, when you get these basics, you have this well-oiled machine. You know how everything works. You know what next, right? What are these next level things? So obviously, fees is a revenue stream that's very important. Other tracking like goal setting, forecasting, and budget. Share of wallet, so experiences or late cancel, check-in, check-out. This as another revenue stream. Increasing share of wallet is actually what that is. It's the concept that someone is coming to your market, they're going to spend money on a tour. How do you get a piece of that? It's increasing your share of their wallet. Direct book strategy, you know, just again, like as you're developing your brand, you don't want to, you know, cut off demand from channels, but there's also an opportunity for you to, you know, drive direct, which can lead to more profit in your pocket. And then this next level, and I don't know, Andrew, it's funny, like you were like, make this graduate and make this PhD. So we put these in this category, the distribution costs, right? And this gets into like, why does book direct matter? Does it matter? Providing book direct advantage and channel mix, cost of acquisition, and really understanding, right? Like down to where do you have credit card fees, commission versus, host fee, whatever, right? It all tying that all together. Top of funnel is definitely, you know, predictive data to inform being a first mover, like we talked about airline or demand IQ. And then attribute modeling. This is really, and some of you may kind of do this on some level already, right? Understanding like if you have a hot tub, what is the value of that? And then do you want to use some of this analytics to inform like having owners add hot tubs, right? Or helping them buy the hot tub, those kinds of things, or convincing them to be pet friendly. That's kind of next level stuff. Anything on this, Andrew? Did I go too fast?
No, the reason I think there are college and post-grad courses on revenue management. This stuff is really hard. And I think you can get all that in kind of an accelerated format with Heather, of course. They can help with all of these things. Heather and her team, she's got a great team. But I do want to stress that I think what Heather and I were kind of excited about is, look, we're trying to build some foundations here. First, thinking about the right comp set. And Emery asked us a question, which I'm going to ask you in a second about, you know, how do you get kind of the right, make sure you have the right data for this, but you got to get the right comp set. You then need to get the kind of figure out through RevPAR index how you're performing against that comp set or against your market, right? And that's really setting you up for the next level of a commercial organization, which is here. And the commercial organizations, these are large functions in hotels, right? They report to the board. These are the organizations that like this is kind of a never-ending pursuit, the way to drive and maximize revenue from your portfolio. But I would say, even though these things might look intimidating, analyzing, like for example, attribute modeling, probably not something that everyone's doing on this call. Really hard. Need a specialty skill for that to some degree. But if you get the other parts right, I would say, and Heather, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think if you get the other parts of the right comp set, and you're paying to RevPAR, and you're paying attention to RevPAR index, and even if you're just starting to think about systems mapping, you're probably getting to a pretty good place, right? With having the right pieces there to drive revenue. Is that fair? Or do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's why we really say like that our minimum once we engage to work with someone, it's about 3 months. Like in a 3-month period, we just help you go through all that stuff to help you like land on, kind of that stabilization of what was kind of section 1 and 2 of this. Yeah.
And if I do have time, so Emery asked a question. The question is, how can we overcome the challenge of market data accuracy while calculating RevPAR index?
So maybe what you're referring to is like the concept of scrape data versus authoritative data. And scrape data is imperfect in that you're getting directionally good information, but you do have to somewhat take things with a grain of salt. We talk a lot about like where there might be holes in different data. So I'll maybe use an example. So in a market, key data might be super great for like the larger homes in that market. But if your portfolio has a lot of smaller like studios or 1-bedrooms, maybe when you look at it, you're not able to get access to enough. Maybe it's because all of that supply is like run by owners, not as professionally managed, whatever the reason is, right? So it might be you still want to do that. So you might have to use a different data source, right? Like Wheelhouse would be a source, obviously, to do that. So maybe there's a combination view that you develop because you come to a realization of where the holes in the data are. We also talk a lot about validating, like when we're using any scrape data, we say like, okay, is it Airbnb? Is it Vrbo? Are fees included or not? Should we make an assumption about that the comp set is marking up rate on the channel like we are, but their direct book rate is actually going to be here? And if you talk about it right and you kind of, again, like develop your narrative, what is the story of your market, the supply, the data sources, you can get to a place that so then when you're benchmarking, you just know, right? Like, here's how we're going to view this. I don't know if that was helpful.
Wheelhouse, we obviously have a lot of data too, but one of the reasons we were excited to pair with Key Data is we think our data sets actually will go together very nicely. Key Data has a lot of these large operators, particularly in sun and snow destinations, and they have really deep and extensive historic data. But we really like what they bring to the table as a partner there. So in terms of overcoming the data accuracy challenges, my way of thinking about this too, Heather, is I don't know that you need to be 100% accurate to directionally understand what a market is doing, right? And I think with Wheelhouse, I would say between your market report and your comp set, you're probably going to get a really strong sense directionally of where you need to be. And even if it's imperfect, and I'll name that, like, I don't think there's no data set in the STR space that's as comprehensive as what the hotel space has yet, right? It's coming, but it's probably still 2 years away. And we can talk more in another conversation about why. But I think it's a good question, Emery. I think the overcoming the challenge of data accuracy, I would say look at a couple sources, Key Data, Wheelhouse, etc. Look at us in conjunction. I do think on your comp set on the Wheelhouse, on the Wheelhouse site, you're able to export all that data now too. So if you wanted to kind of export it, run your own RevPAR calculations, and then kind of over time see how accurate and informative it was, we definitely would invite you to do that. John also asked a question, Heather. Are there any data sources in the STR space where we can access RevPARs to calculate RevPAR index?
Well, any data source that just calculates RevPAR for you, right? You could use that. But ultimately, sometimes on data sources, you have to make assumptions about price, like what is the on the books rate versus is the rate shop, what's selling, right? And there can be a difference too between like rates being sold in the market and rates, rate shops. I don't know if that makes sense. I guess there's not an exact answer to that because you do have to kind of ask those questions, right, to figure out how you want to build out the formula. Is that helpful? Maybe ask another question to clarify. Maybe
what I'll show quickly, I just want to show for John and Emery too. I'm going to share my screen for a second here. Okay. I'm gonna share a demo account. So unfortunately, this will just show you. We won't have data for this listing because this listing actually, again, it's a hypothetical listing, which means my data here won't show anything. So if you go to your Wheelhouse comp set, right, which you can reach from a number of ways, but I'll just walk you through it. If you're on your dashboard, if you clicked on a sample property, or click on any property of yours, you'll now be able to see this comp set, right? If I were to click into the comp set, and again, it's going to look a little less interesting because there isn't any occupancy in real data here, only asking rates on a fake property. However, I can toggle over to performance. I can look at things like RevPAR, and what I can actually do, I don't know if you know this, but I can select all this information, and I'm going to right click on this, and I'm actually able to export all of this data. So Heather and our team are actually working with a customer now where this exporting functionality is being put into use. So that means you can export data now from our market reports, you can export it from our comp sets, you can export it from our dashboard, and you can run all the tests you want. So John, if you wanted to get a data source where you could access RevPARs and calculate your RevPAR index, you can do so here. Now you're going to need to run an additional query or kind of like set this up in another spreadsheet. We can help with that. So please reach out to us if you have questions there. But additionally, RevPAR index is so valuable. I want to continue working with Heather and her team to bring some of that capabilities in the tooling for you all, so you can see that more easily, because it is something we could calculate for you all. So in the interim, in the next few months here, you can export it. You can use all your own data. Again, this is the comp set tools. It's live as of a couple weeks ago, and the way I got to it was from my dashboard. I clicked on a listing, and I clicked on the comp set here. I could also go to the comp set dashboard, and now I'm going to see all of my listings, all of my comp sets, and I'm going to see, again, the RevPAR. These are all demo properties. You'll see real data for you. But that's another place to go. At least look at your RevPAR, which is one of the key things to figuring out your RevPAR index. So hopefully that helped a little bit as well, but it is available. There's some of this functionality is available today in the tool, and hopefully you can use it. Heather, we're past time.
I know. I just realized.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm going to just quickly share this so folks can see how to find us. Yes, this has been fun. I mean, obviously, we'll continue to partner. Ultimately, these are the steps, right? Get your business process right, your views of data and configuration right, and then it's beginning your journey eating the competition's lunch. And just a little recap of who we are. Obviously, we're here. Like, talk to us for free, right? Just like give us a ring. Happy to brainstorm and just do a quick discovery call. But then if you are looking for help, especially in Wheelhouse, right, or in Key Data too, with just how do you want to use the tool and get it set up, we can help you with just that. And then obviously our goal is to have long-term partners to help you succeed, in the long run. So I think with that, In closing, Andrew, I don't know if you want to wrap. I'll stop sharing here.
If you want to go, there's one more slide, I believe.
Yep.
It should be our contact information. I think, first of all, Heather, thank you so much. It's a honor to be able to kind of take lessons you've learned, that you and your team have learned over 25 years, and share them out with folks. I think it's a really compassionate thing. The way you educate people is really second to none. So hopefully today, I know we stepped through comp set benchmarking 101. There's a lot there, but Heather, fair to say getting a foundational comp set is extremely critical. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
The stepping through RevPAR index, truly, I do believe this is the metric you need to know. I think Heather's team is fantastic at it. They'll share a lot more. Not easy to learn in 15 minutes, but I'm sure you all did great with that today. and then of course, we're just setting up the foundation for the larger building revenue management function, right? There's a lot you can do. You want the right prices distributed at the right places, targeting the right customers at the right time. And it's a complicated system that you're building here. So thank you all for enjoying the journey with us. Heather, on the next slide, we just left your contact information as well. If you have questions for Heather, please reach out, Heather, Richard Logic. You can also reach out to our team if you need help with any aspect of comp sets or other things, or you want to learn more about Wheelhouse and our capabilities, sales@usewheelhouse.com. But Heather, thank you so much. Any last words of wisdom for us?
I guess I would just say, like, it's a journey. So, if you're on this call, you're obviously taking it seriously, and you're off to a great start. And as an industry, we have a ways to go, but it's exciting to be part of it. So more collaboration, I'm sure, with you in the future, Andrew. I look forward to that. And look forward to hearing from anyone on the line. So feel free to reach out. Yeah, thanks for that, Amelia. So, okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Heather. Amazing. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll share the materials after this, so you have a video of Heather. You can step through it at your leisure. If you have any feedback or questions, you know where to reach us. And otherwise, be well all. We appreciate your time today.
All right. Talk soon. Thanks.
Bye. All.